Israel-Gaza conflict. The Israel-Hamas conflict remains a complex foreign policy challenge. After a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Harris delivered a forceful speech addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. She reiterated the US's unwavering support for Israel's right to self-defense, but also expressed strong empathy for Palestinian suffering, emphasizing the urgent need for humanitarian aid and a ceasefire that includes Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza. Economy and jobs. Kamala Harris has positioned herself as a champion for working and middle-class families, focusing on several key economic issues. She emphasizes no tax increases for those making under $400,000, maintaining the Biden administration's promise to protect lower and middle-income earners from tax hikes. Harris is particularly concerned with reducing medical debt and making care more affordable and available, including healthcare, childcare, elder care, and family leave. She targets practices that unfairly burden consumers, such as price gouging and hidden fees. As a senator and 2020 presidential candidate, Harris proposed the Lift the Middle Class Act, which would provide middle-class and working families with a refundable tax credit of up to $6,000 a year per couple, aiming to help families keep up with living expenses. During her 2020 campaign, Harris advocated for raising the corporate income tax rate to 35%, higher than Biden's proposed 28%. Additionally, as a senator, she introduced the Rent Relief Act, which would establish a refundable tax credit for renters spending more than 30% of their gross income on rent and utilities. Healthcare. Harris' healthcare platform focuses on improving access and affordability while building on existing systems. She aims to protect and expand the Affordable Care Act, continuing efforts to strengthen and broaden coverage under Obamacare. Harris is also committed to lowering prescription drug costs, building on the Biden administration's efforts to reduce medication prices and making healthcare, including mental health services, more accessible and affordable for all Americans. She supports the continuation of allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, a policy initiated under the Biden administration. Reproductive rights are a central focus of her campaign, especially in light of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. While Harris supported Medicare for All during her 2020 presidential run, she has since aligned more closely with Biden's approach of building on and improving existing healthcare systems rather than a complete overhaul. Commitment to Ukraine. Harris has consistently supported Ukraine in its struggle against Russian aggression. She has met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky multiple times and recently announced $1.5 billion in aid for Ukraine. At the Munich Security Conference, she reinforced the Biden administration's firm stance with Ukraine and highlighted NATO's critical role in global security. Climate change. Harris has a long history of championing climate and environmental justice issues. She plans to invest in clean energy infrastructure and jobs, continuing and expanding on the Biden administration's climate initiatives. She is setting ambitious emission reduction targets and focusing on addressing the disproportionate impact of climate change on marginalized communities. While she has not fully endorsed the entire Green New Deal, Harris supports elements of its framework. As California's Attorney General, she sued big oil companies and investigated ExxonMobil for its role in climate change disinformation. Harris is expected to campaign on the stark contrast between her climate policies and those of Trump, who has vowed to return to fossil fuels and withdraw from global climate commitments. Immigration. On immigration, Harris faces the challenge of balancing border security concerns with a more compassionate approach. She advocates for creating a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, with a particular focus on dreamers. Harris aims to overhaul the asylum and refugee systems to make them more efficient and humane, invest in modern solutions for border management, and continue efforts to tackle the underlying issues driving migration from Central America. As Vice President, Harris was tasked with addressing migration issues at the southern border, an experience that will likely inform her campaign messaging on immigration policy. Criminal justice reform. Given her background as a prosecutor, Harris has made criminal justice reform a key part of her platform. She pushes for comprehensive police reform, measures such as banning chokeholds and racial profiling, and the elimination of mandatory minimum sentences for non-violent drug offences. Harris supports federal legalization of marijuana and expungement of prior convictions, advocates for an end to capital punishment, and aims to overhaul the cash bail system to make it more equitable. She seeks to position herself as someone who can bridge the gap between law enforcement and communities calling for reform. Education. Harris has outlined several priorities for education, including increasing public school funding to boost resources for K-12 public education and advocating for higher salaries for educators. She supports making community college education accessible to all Americans at no cost, broadening programs to alleviate student debt burdens, increasing funding and support for historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and supporting early childhood education initiatives through universal pre-K. Foreign policy. While not a major focus of her early campaign messaging, Harris has outlined some key foreign policy positions. She aims to restore and reinforce relationships with US allies, stand up to authoritarian regimes, including Russia and China, support Israel's security while advocating for a two-state solution, and continue diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. Harris has expressed empathy for Palestinian suffering while maintaining support for Israel's right to defend itself, potentially signaling a more nuanced approach to the Gaza conflict. Abortion rights. Protecting reproductive rights has become a central issue for Harris's campaign. She aims to codify Roe v. Wade by pushing for federal legislation to protect abortion rights, ensure widespread availability of contraceptive options, fight against state-level restrictions on abortion access, and nominate judges who support reproductive rights to federal courts. Supreme Court reform. In response to recent controversial Supreme Court decisions, Harris has proposed some reforms. She supports implementing fixed terms for Supreme Court justices, establishing binding ethical guidelines for the Supreme Court, and considering increasing the number of justices on the court. These proposals aim to address what Harris has called a crisis of confidence in the Supreme Court. Gun control. Harris has advocated for stricter gun control measures, including implementing universal background checks for all gun purchases, prohibiting the sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, supporting red flag laws to temporarily remove guns from those deemed a danger, and preventing domestic abusers from obtaining firearms by closing the boyfriend loophole. She has framed gun violence as both a public safety and public health issue. Voting rights. Protecting and expanding voting rights is another key priority for Harris. She pushes for the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to strengthen voting protections, implementing systems to automatically register eligible voters, making Election Day a national holiday to increase participation, and fighting against efforts to restrict voting access. Harris has emphasized the importance of protecting democracy and ensuring all eligible voters have access to the ballot.